Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. When I woke up in the morning, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except that my wife Debbie wasn't in bed next to me. I usually get up a little earlier because I start work at 8 o'clock, and my wife doesn't get up before 9:30. I finished my morning chores and headed downstairs to make coffee for my wife and me when I smelled the coffee already ready. When I came downstairs, my wife, already dressed for work, was sitting at a corner breakfast table. She smiled at me and we wished each other good morning. While I was pouring myself coffee, my wife said, "I have to leave for work early this morning for a meeting. I'll be free by 5 o'clock and I'll be right back home so we can talk as soon as you get home." This caught me off guard a bit, and I raised an eyebrow and asked, Oh, did I forget something? What do we need to talk about?" Debbie just waved her hand and said we'd talk about it later, that there was nothing that couldn't wait. With that, she stood up, put her cup in the sink, kissed me goodbye, and walked out the door before I could say anything. Before going into this story, I have to tell you a little bit about us. I'm Tim Johnson. My wife Debbie and I have been married for over 41 years. That's right, we got married right after graduating from high school when we were 18 years old. We've known each other since the 2nd grade. We dated all through high school and both knew we were destined to be together for the rest of our lives. None of us had ever met anyone else, and so we learned about love together and were the only love partners. Heck, I've never kissed another woman except on the cheek as a greeting, and I guess it was the same with my wife. We went to college together as a married couple, living in a cheap apartment and working part-time to get by. I had an account from the GI Bill, a program created to help veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces, to help with her school expenses, and her parents helped her. So although it was a little difficult, it wasn't that harsh. In fact, we started our family when we were still in college. Our eldest child, Terry, is 37 years old. She is married and has 2 children. She works as a family law attorney at an out-of-state firm. Our second, Darcy, is 35 years old, single, and works in Washington as an assistant director at the Department of Agriculture. Our baby, Sydney, is 34 years old. She is married to a police officer in our hometown. She is raising our 2 grandchildren and is a hard-working stay-at-home mom. We are very proud of all 3 of our girls. After school, I went to work as a risk analyst for a large insurance corporation, and Debbie became a gymnasium teacher in the local school district, and then worked in the administrative office part-time. At the age of 59, we are both in great physical shape. We've both always been very active. I play golf, swim, and go to the gym at least 3 times a week. However, my wife puts me in an awkward position with her discipline in training. She goes to the gym 5 days a week, and almost every day does long-distance running. I may be biased, but she's still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. She weighs the same as she did on our wedding day. Not bad for 3 children and 41 years of marriage. When we were young, she was so beautiful that when she entered a room, even women stopped to stare at her. To this day, she attracts the attention of men half her age, but she always carries herself with dignity and class. Debbie and I talk about it all the time. Our family life is the embodiment of the American dream. We are so lucky to have found each other, and we thank our lucky stars every day for the life we lead. Unlike most men, when they hear the words, "Honey, we need to talk," I don't get terrified or break out in a cold sweat. I was curious, but after all, we talk all the time. We call them family discussions, and we had them even before we had children. It was our way of planning our lives, but she didn't say we were going to have a family discussion, did she? At work, I was not preoccupied with anxiety about the upcoming meeting, but I dreamed a little about an unforgettable lovemaking the night before. Debbie is a very lively and direct lover. She doesn't hesitate to tell me what she wants and gets her way. She never fakes that very moment, because a long time ago we discussed that we should be honest with each other and strive to make our love life better, and faking this moment will not help. Debbie is not the kind of lady who experiences a series of small moments. When she crosses the line, she screams with incredible force. Her whole body shudders, her eyes roll up, and she sometimes loses consciousness for a few seconds. She doesn't even want to be touched for a few minutes because her whole body is so sensitive. It's amazing to watch and be a part of it. She constantly tells me that she will never cheat on me, because it would take too much time to prepare a new lover. After 41 years of marriage, we still make love too, 3 times a week. All in all, we enjoyed a very pleasant love life right up to middle age. Since my curiosity was aroused, I left work a little earlier and headed home. I wanted to get home before Debbie so I could change my clothes, get comfortable with a glass of my favorite single malt whiskey, and find out what our conversation was going to be about. My curiosity turned to concern when I pulled into the garage and saw that my wife's 7-year-old Camry was already there. My anxiety increased when I saw that she was sitting at the table with a glass of wine in her hand, and my scotch was already poured and put in my place. She looked very confused, as she constantly rubbed her knee with her free hand. It's been her nervous habit since I've known her. I asked if I could change before we started. She replied, "No, I want to do it right now. Please sit down." I didn't argue, because when I sat down, I was sure that she was going to tell me that she was ill. I felt my chest constrict and it became difficult to breathe normally. When I looked into her eyes, I don't know what I saw, but I knew that I had never seen such a look and expression before. She seemed nervous, and her voice cracked when she spoke in a very low, deliberate tone. "Tim, there's something I've been thinking about for quite some time, and I need to say it without interruption. Please let me finish before you speak, so that you understand how important this is to me." As she continued, she seemed to gain more confidence. "And I need you not to lose your temper and turn this whole thing into a child's scream. Can you do this for me, please?" I nodded my head slowly without saying a word. At least she wasn't going to tell me she was sick, but I suspected it would be much worse. And I was right. "Honey, you know that I love you more than life. Since my school years, I've only loved you. There was no one else in my life. My chest was hurting more and more. It was getting harder to breathe, and there was a nagging pain in my shoulder as she continued. You and I will spend our old age together, rocking our great-grandchildren on our laps. We're going to travel the world together, but there's something I have to do." The pain in my shoulder was now radiating to my left arm, and I was dizzy. I couldn't catch my breath. "Tim, pay attention, this is very important." I just nodded, thinking that this couldn't be happening to me. "I've been thinking about this for months now, and there's something I have to do before I get too old." The room began to spin, and it seemed to me that someone was standing on my chest. "I'm going to date other men to find out what I've been missing all these years. It won't last forever, maybe 6 months, and I will become your loving wife again, proving to you every day how deep my love for you is." I started to say something, but nothing came out of my mouth, and then everything went dark. Light was coming out of the darkness, trying to break through the haze. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids probably weighed 2 kilograms each. I tried my best to open them and finally managed the task. Where have I been? What were those beeps? Why can't I move? My throat hurt a lot. What's my name? I must be in the hospital. What happened to me? All these thoughts flashed through my head when I remembered that I was Tim Johnson and I was in the hospital because my wife tried to kill me. Why did she try to kill me? My brain is working a little better. I was sitting at the kitchen table. She was talking. Then I remembered the conversation. It wasn't really a conversation, but that she said something to me. She said she was going to kill me. When the fog in my brain cleared, I noticed a nurse standing by my bed looking at me and smiling. "Welcome back, Mr. Johnson. My name is Nurse Smith. You are in Mercy Hospital because you had a very serious heart attack a few days ago. It's called the Widowmaker, and you're lucky to be alive." It's funny, but I didn't feel lucky. "It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and the doctor will come later this morning to tell you more about your condition." I tried to speak, but nothing came out because my throat was sore and dry. "Don't try to talk, Mr. Johnson. You had a ventilator in your throat, so it will take several days for it to heal itself." Now I was thinking more clearly and made a written movement with my hand. Nurse Smith handed me a notebook and a pen. I wrote it in large, bold type. "No visitors." She replied, "Oh no, you had a lot of visitors. Your wife and daughters were here." She must have noticed how startled I was and fell silent. I wrote furiously, "I don't want any visitors." She seemed startled, but asked, "Are you sure?" I just nodded my head. I scribbled another note. "Do not share my medical information with anyone." Her eyebrows shot up, but she just nodded her head while I wrote another note. "Is there anyone here at the hospital who can help me fill out the DNR form? Do not resuscitate." I'm sure I shocked Nurse Smith with this, but she kept her composure. "Your condition is not that severe." I interrupted her by tapping furiously on my notebook. "I will convey your wishes to the day shift." She patted me on the shoulder and quietly left the room. I decided that my life was over anyway, so if something happened, why let the medics resuscitate me? Judging by how lucky I was, I'll probably survive, but I'll turn into a vegetable, so to hell with it. Besides, it would be an additional shock when my wife found out what I had done and how much she had offended me. I couldn't fall asleep again. That is, I had been sleeping for several days, so all I could do was lie down, think, and make plans. I said that I was doing risk analysis for an insurance company, but in fact my job was to help my company's clients conduct risk analysis for their organizations. This was a service that my company offered, and many customers used it. I've been doing this for several years. I've been good at it, and I've been paid accordingly. In my experience, all companies are afraid of something, but my job was to make sure they were afraid of the right things and to come up with solutions to reduce these threats. There is a certain process for conducting such an analysis, so I decided to apply the same strategy to solve my problem. You know why my wife wanted to kill me? I know my wife wasn't really trying to kill me with her statement, but damn it, she almost got it. The actions I've just taken will buy me time, and time is what I need to figure everything out. Lying in bed and waiting for dawn, I began to analyze my situation. I am one of those strange people who, when they think, talk to themselves, and this case was no exception. Okay, Tim, you've bought some time. Now let's think about the real problems. It was not unusual for my wife to speak very bluntly and briefly, so she wasn't trying to shock me with her statements. It's just the way she's approached everything her whole life. What did she say? She's been thinking about it for months. Should I have noticed something? Changes in her behavior? Did she give me verbal hints that I missed? Maybe she has already cheated on me. I answered all these questions in the negative. Debbie is not flighty and does not tend to act at random. She acts deliberately, but as soon as she formulates a plan of action, she does not hesitate and does not talk in vain, but goes ahead. Another very important fact. She did not say that she would like to date other guys. She said that she was going to date other guys. So Tim, you have a real problem that probably won't go away because she put you in the hospital. Heck. So Tim, these are the scenarios I see. First, you can just let her date guys and hope that sooner or later she'll get it out of her head and we can get back to the way things were. Secondly, you can try to talk her out of it because, to be honest, I don't see myself as a husband who shares his wife. Third, just divorce her and get it over with. Or fourth, you can just die and not worry about it. To be honest, the fourth option doesn't look so bad right now. I still feel like shit. Obviously, I was wrong. I was able to fall asleep because the next moment daylight poured in through the window and the clock on the wall showed 10:40. Shortly after I woke up, the doctor came and explained that the creator of widow's heart attack occurs due to a complete blockage of the left anterior descending artery of the heart. He said that I was very lucky because with this type of heart attack, the survival rate is very low. If my wife hadn't been with me and called 911, I would have died. Okay, he was the second person to tell me how lucky I was, but I still didn't feel it. I asked him if severe stress could cause a similar attack. He replied, well, yes, severe emotional trauma can provoke it, but heart problems should have existed a long time ago. It is caused by a combination of genetics and high cholesterol levels. Why are you asking? I explained as best I could what happened between me and my wife. He said, well, that explains your request to ban visits and DNR. Mr. Johnson, you will be here for a few more days, but you will need a lot of rest during the recovery period, which will take some time. We were able to install a stent instead of a bypass, so it will shorten your recovery time. I cannot help you with your personal problems, but I strongly recommend that you contact a psychologist to help you solve your problems when you embark on the path of recovery. Believe it or not, one of the most common side effects of such a heart attack is depression, and with your relationship problems, it seems to me that you are at risk. With these words, he left the room. No goodbye, nothing. I don't blame him. Doctors usually don't like talking to patients. Just give them pills or operate on them, and then leave. Then there was another doctor who told me she was a hospitalist and listed all the medications I would need over the next year or so. It was a damn pharmacy list. Yes, solution 4 looked better and better. Shortly after the hospitalist left, I heard a noise in the hallway. The commotion was caused by my wife being told she couldn't see me. After making a scene, she asked about my condition. I had to call security to forcibly take her out when she was told that I specifically asked not to tell her about my condition. For the first time since she hit me with her plans, I felt a little better. It's childish, I know, but it was still a small victory. Apparently the doctor, having learned about my situation, prescribed me a sedative, Either that, or I was so tired that I slept for more than a day. When I woke up again, it was already the middle of the night, and Nurse Smith was standing by my bed. "I'm glad to see you awake," she said, trying to cheer me up. "Could you try to say something for me?" I was able to speak, albeit with a slight hoarseness, but thank God at least I could speak. She asked if we could talk, and I nodded my head. Yes, but only if she would call me Tim. She laughed and said it was okay and that I should call her Beth. She started the conversation by saying that she was aware of my situation and understood why I set the no visitors rule, but was still concerned about the DNR request. I told her to forget about DNR, that I didn't really want to die, and that I knew that sooner or later I would have to talk to my wife. But of course I didn't want to do that until I was well enough. Beth then told me she understood, but she had to kick my wife and all 3 girls out of the room shortly before I woke up. She told me what I already knew, that at some point I'll have to talk to my wife, but given the circumstances, maybe I can talk to my daughters? At that moment, it struck me how much, if anything, do my daughters know about what their mother told me. The girls were very close to their mother, and maybe they knew in advance what she was going to say? Probably not. But Debbie was especially close to Darcy. Despite the fact that she was in Washington, they talked on the phone almost every day. So maybe Darcy was aware? Maybe Debbie told the girls the truth after what happened to me? Anyway, I agreed with Beth that I should talk to the girls, especially since the older ones had traveled a great distance to be with me. Beth said she would contact them and ask them to come back to talk to me, but only one at a time. I told her in no uncertain terms that I wasn't going to talk to my wife, and she understood me. I found it interesting that the girls returned to my room after 5 minutes. Apparently, Beth only kicked them out to the waiting room. I was sure it had already been decided, but I wanted to see my girls, so what the hell. That evening, I talked to each of my daughters, but I told them that I didn't want to talk about their mother. I wanted them to know how glad I am to see them, and that I love them very much. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I was very excited when I finally realized how close I was to never seeing them again. Sydney let slip in conversation that Debbie had told all 3 of them that she blamed herself for what happened to me, but without specifics. I didn't argue with Sydney, and I know she found it interesting. She also mentioned that Debbie promised to meet with them tomorrow and explain everything. Terry and Darcy told me they would take a long vacation to help me recover. I was overwhelmed with emotions, and Beth had to interrupt the visit. After meeting my daughters, I realized that no matter what happened to Debbie, life would go on. My life is going to get harder, but it's not going to end. I just had to decide what to do with my relationship with my wife. Was there any point in talking to her about it at all? Even if she cancels her dating plans, will I still be able to live with her? I needed to answer this question before talking to her. Maybe the girls will help me with a solution. If Sydney was right, Debbie should have told them what triggered my heart attack, so their opinion might have helped me. Cheating affects not only the couple's relationship, it affects the whole family. A very interesting event was that my wife and daughters decided that after I was discharged from the hospital, I would stay in our house, and my wife would move to Sydney's family in their guest room. Terry and Darcy will take turns providing the care I need for several weeks. The doctors were sure that I would return to normal life in 5-6 weeks. Everything was fine with me, but it seemed very strange to me that during the first 2 weeks while I was at home, my wife did not make a single attempt to contact me. There wasn't even a text message. Perhaps the girls read her the riot act and told her to back off. Or maybe she used this opportunity to go on dates. I just didn't know, but I didn't want to get into a direct confrontation. I decided to talk to Darcy first, as she has always been close to her mother and perhaps could give me an idea of my wife's state of mind. Darcy and I met alone at the house, and she knew in advance that I wanted to talk to her about this incident. I, like my wife, am a pretty direct person, so as soon as Darcy entered the room, I immediately blurted out, "Darcy, how long have you known about your mother's desire to date other men?" We talked about it a little bit," she mumbled, not looking me in the eye. "How long has it been, Darcy?" I growled. "I'm sorry, Dad. About 3-4 months. My blood pressure was rising and I was already losing control of myself. It wasn't good. I needed to calm down. I'm sorry, Darcy, I didn't mean to yell at you. I really need your opinion. It hit me very hard. I had no idea that your mother was unhappy with our relationship. It literally breaks my heart." I tried to calm myself down a bit. "Dad, she loves you very much, and it doesn't mean anything. She just wants to experience something before she gets too old. This should not affect your relationship at all. Do you really believe in this nonsense? I mean, Darcy, how can her love with other men mean nothing to me? I'm shocked that you can say that. So you think I should let her make love to other men so she can experience more in her life, and then come back to me as if nothing had happened? Well, maybe not as if nothing had happened, but your love for her must be strong enough to survive this. She's dedicated her whole life to you, to all of us, and she just wants it for herself. Really, Dad, you're 59 years old and you've probably slowed down a bit. It's normal that Mom wants to meet younger men. This is a natural desire for a woman. That was a shock. I thought Debbie didn't want to date old men, but when I heard this from my daughter, I was shocked. It was all about love. Although I may have slowed down, I thought I was still doing pretty well, but it seems I was wrong. Shouldn't her love for me be so strong that she doesn't have to date other men to satisfy herself? And what if I slowed down? Is this a reason for her cheating on me? Don't be silly, Dad. It wouldn't be treason if you knew about it. That's why she tried to talk to you about it. We walked around for another 5-10 minutes, but we didn't come to anything. Darcy expressed her opinion on this issue with all certainty. I needed to end this conversation before I exploded. In an almost childish voice, Darcy asked, "What are you going to do, Dad?" "I don't know, Darcy, I just don't know, but I can't live with the fact that your mom sleeps with other men. I just wasn't cut out for it." I was well aware that Debbie would quickly find out the details of our conversation. We hugged and said goodbye. I thought to myself that I hoped Darcy would never get married, or at least tell her fiancé about her beliefs in advance. My conversation with Terry was the exact opposite. She came into the room all worked up and spat out, "I can't believe that this fool is doing this to us." "Hey there," I said, raising my hand to her face. "This is your mother you're talking about, and she's not doing this to us. She's doing this to me. Understand, Dad, when someone in the family cheats, it affects all of us. So yeah, she's cheating on her family." Terry, you said cheating, but not what she's going to change." "You really don't know, do you, Dad?" "She's been seeing men since you were in the hospital. I think she was doing it before you had a heart attack. I don't think she's slept with any of them yet, but she's definitely listening to them." I suspected that after this revelation, my relationship with Darcy was practically over. It wouldn't surprise me if Debbie was dating. It was weird. I kept waiting for another heart attack, or at least a stroke, but it didn't happen. I felt only sadness because at that moment I realized that my marriage was over. To tell you the truth, I wasn't surprised that Debbie did that. She's always been strong. But why did she call an ambulance when I had a heart attack? It didn't make any sense, except in her own bizarre way, did she at least like me? All I could do was shake my head. I wondered again, is there really any reason to sit down and talk to her? Terry and I talked for a while longer, mostly about the divorce laws in our state. In the no-fault state, it wasn't that difficult. The entire property is divided 50-50. Terry said that I might consider a legal separation if I wasn't sure about getting a divorce from Debbie. I told her that I would consider this option, but I don't think it makes any difference. Terry also told me that although my wife can't stop the divorce, she can delay it. This caught my attention, and I decided to seek legal help as soon as possible. Terry said she would send me some recommendations on lawyers the next day. My conversation with Sydney was that I was trying to comfort her because she couldn't stop crying. She demanded that I let Debbie come home. I reminded her that I didn't send her away. She can come home at any time. The house belonged to her as much as to me. I asked her a couple of sharp questions. "Sydney, did your mom go on dates after my stay in the hospital?" Although I already knew the answer, I wanted to get confirmation. Sydney just nodded her head and continued to cry. "How often, Sid?" Through her tears, she stammered, "Almost every night, Dad. I tried to talk to her about it. I told her that she was cheating on you, and she replied that she wasn't because she wasn't sleeping with any of them, and besides, she told you what she was going to do. All I could do was shake my head in disbelief. Before Sydney left, I called her mother and told her that I was feeling better and that she could return to her house anytime she wanted. At the same time, I stressed that, in my opinion, she should do this as soon as possible, because Sydney would have a nervous breakdown if she did not leave her house. I hung up while she was saying something, but I didn't care what she said. I was ready for our meeting. Sydney told me that my wife would be home at 1 o'clock the next day, so I spent the rest of the day preparing my notes. When you go into battle, it is very important to have a good plan, carefully tested and worked out. And I was ready to fight. Of course, at the first shot, the plan goes out the window. And that's exactly what happened to me. When Debbie returned home for our meeting, she didn't just walk through the front door, but burst through it screaming, "Where are you?" My eyes were already wide when she saw me sitting at the table with my notes neatly spread out in front of me. Without waiting for any comments from me, she continued her tirade, breathing fire. "There's not going to be a damn divorce." As I mentioned, my wife was a school teacher and history was her favorite subject. She was particularly well versed in the period of the American Civil War. It was obvious to me that she was using the strategy of Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain of the American 20th Maine Regiment at Little Round Top on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Circumstances turned out that Chamberlain's 20th Maine Regiment was on the extreme left flank of the Union Army and was the only regiment standing between Lee's Confederate Army and Washington. The fighting was fierce. Chamberlain's men were exhausted and almost out of ammunition. Their losses were extremely high, and it seemed that everything was lost. Then Chamberlain, a rather inconspicuous college professor of rhetoric in civilian life, did something that no one expected. He ordered his remaining troops to attack. They did so, and the Union, in fact, was saved. That's exactly what my wife did to me. She attacked when she should have been defending herself, and I was completely stunned. The next thing I remember is that I'm lying on our bed on my back, and Debbie sits on top of me, putting her hands on my chest, and at the same time screams something barely intelligible that there will be no divorce. We love each other and will be together forever. Her breasts bounced from side to side and shook wildly, making it impossible for me to concentrate. I thought she was trying to finish the job she started a few weeks ago when she gave me a heart attack. Much later, having completely exhausted me, she began to get dressed and said that she would return tomorrow with things from Sydney's house and that we would move on. As she walked out the door of our bedroom, I said softly, "Debbie, thanks for calling an ambulance." She nodded and said irritably, "It's because I love you, you fool, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives together, and now get some rest, because we have to make up for lost time," and went to the door. "Debbie, there's something else." I managed to say it with all the authority I could muster. "The first time you make love to someone else, our marriage will be over." Panting with excitement, she spat out, "Then we'll see." Obviously, she was also a fan of John Wayne. For a month or two, our lives returned to normal, although it was a new direction because she still went on dates. We didn't say another word to each other about my threat of divorce. She never told me she was going on a date, but once or twice a week she just said she was leaving and would be home late. On such evenings, she usually returned home around midnight. She never smelled of love, although sometimes she looked a little disheveled. She took a shower, went to bed, and then resumed her attempts to kill me with love. I just accepted it and decided that if I had to die, it would be a great way. I knew she hadn't been in love with anyone yet because, well, just because I knew. And then one evening she returned home even later than usual. It was already over 1 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting in bed reading. I could never sleep when she wasn't at home. It wasn't that I was worried about her. I was just waiting for the inevitable. I heard the garage door open as she drove in her car. Her CFM heels clicked on the tiled floor in the kitchen, and the stairs creaked as she climbed. When she entered the bedroom, our eyes met, and I immediately understood. It was obvious that she understood that I understood. She broke eye contact and headed to the main bathroom, saying, "It doesn't mean anything. This is beyond us and will end in a few months. There is no need for further discussion." And she closed the door behind her. When I heard the shower turn on, I got up and went to the guest room. I not only locked the door but also pulled a chest of drawers to it. I wasn't going to repeat the mistake I made in the Little Round Top. Somehow I knew she wouldn't come after me. It wasn't like her. In her opinion, when I get over my little annoyance, everything will go on as usual. And I was right. I didn't hear a sound from her for the rest of the night. For my part, I didn't sleep at all. There were tears in my eyes. I was mourning the death of my marriage, and my thoughts were busy planning. For the next couple of weeks, we looked more like roommates than a married couple. We were polite to each other, but just went about our daily chores and responsibilities. I know she went out a few more times, but I didn't know what she was doing. I completely moved into the guest room and usually slept when she came home. Yes, I did sleep. I found that as my plans progressed, I became more calm and confident that I had chosen the right path. I've never had a hand-wringing period of woe is me. I didn't wonder what I could have done better. I didn't blame myself for not being a more attentive husband. I refused to apologize or take responsibility for not being aware of all the emotions my wife might be experiencing. In my understanding, marriage is a contract. She broke the contract, not me. She never discussed problems or frustrations with me. She just told me what she was going to do. But the funny thing was, part of me understood why she wanted to experience more. This is a natural human emotion. She just didn't give us a chance to find an alternative. She made a unilateral decision that effectively ended us. The end of the story. I also understood why she made the decision unilaterally. In the Western world, almost 100% of marriages are more or less dominated by a woman. Ours was no exception. I suppose if I could find any mistake in this mess, it would be that I was too accommodating. But in more than 50 years of our life together, there was nothing that could let her know that I would accept her behavior. I let her make most of the decisions about our home life because it made her happy, and it was more important to her. In fact, before we got married, we discussed our expectations of fidelity for a long time. There were no gray areas and certainly no gaps. I've never been close to changing. I've never done anything that didn't pass the marital fidelity test, and I expected the same from Debbie. She did this to us, not me. A couple of weeks after Debbie cheated on me for the first time, I was ready for it. One evening after she left, I was sitting at the kitchen table, where we spent most of our family meetings, waiting for her to return. When she returned, I said softly, "Debbie, we need to talk." "Not now," she replied dismissively. "I need to take a shower and get some sleep." "We can talk in the morning." "No," I replied with an authority she hadn't heard from me before. "We'll talk right now. Please sit down." She was clearly angry with me and sat down in the chair opposite mine with annoyance. Her nervousness was obvious and probably explained by the fact that she smelled like her lover, but I didn't care. I handed her an envelope from Manila across the table and said clearly, "These are the divorce papers. I submitted them due to irreconcilable differences." At that moment, she started to say something and I raised my hand in front of her face. "No, just sit here. A few months ago, you told me to sit and listen to you without interrupting, and I expect you to do the same until I'm done." She leaned back, rolled her eyes, crossed her arms over her chest and stared at me. "These documents explain everything," I said. "My lawyer's card is in the envelope. You can sign them and return them to his office. If you don't do this within 3 days, I will have no choice but to serve you at work. I don't want to embarrass you in public, but honestly, it wouldn't be difficult for me to do it where most of your lovers are. Don't worry, I wasn't following you. I don't have any photos, audio, or video recordings of your infidelities. None of this matters to me." I continued, "It's very simple. In a guilt-free state, everything is divided in half. Our children have grown up and live independently. The house is paid for. We pay off our shared credit card debt and move on." "Are you done?" "What is it?" she asked in her most condescending tone. I just nodded my head. Standing up, she said, "Okay, we're not getting divorced. I'm tired and I'm going to bed. Good night." The next morning, she wanted to talk. Interestingly, for the first time in a long time, she cooked a good breakfast for us. She looked quite cheerful while messing around in the kitchen. When breakfast was ready and I lifted my jaw off the floor, she calmly sat down and motioned with her hand for me to do the same. It was getting surreal. I did not sit down, said that I would eat outside the house, and went out the door. She didn't know that I was heading to the apartment I rented near work and that I had no intention of ever entering this house again, except to pick up my things when the divorce was finalized. I thought I heard her crying softly as I got into the car, but I couldn't be sure. At that moment, I wasn't going to continue the conversation. My direction was clear. She never contacted me except through her lawyer, and I did the same. Of course, she did not sign the papers, and I asked her to officially serve her at work, as I said. She found herself a lawyer and began to do everything possible to disrupt the divorce process. No amount of persuasion on my part or on the part of our daughters influenced her actions, but in the end, she couldn't do anything to stop the divorce, and 6 months later, we were finally sitting in family court with our lawyers. To be honest, I didn't pay much attention to what was being said. I just wanted it to be over. My lawyer told me that this was the only official meeting I had to attend, and I was grateful. But when the judge addressed my wife directly, I sat down and focused my attention. "Mrs. Johnson, why don't you want me to grant this divorce application in the form in which it is written? Everything looks like a fair distribution of property." My wife answered by standing in front of the judge, dressed like she was going to church. "Your Honor, A few months ago, I made a terrible decision that destroyed our 41-year marriage. At that time, I was going through menopause and was not thinking clearly. I felt old and unattractive. Several young men at work flirted with me and showered me with praise and attention. It's sad that I absurdly thought that my husband would understand and let me have a few months of harmless affairs. I was stunned when she continued. He knew I'd been seeing other men for months, and I assumed he didn't mind. Now I realized that I was wrong. I stopped seeing anyone when he filed the divorce papers for me. In fact, I went to a therapist several times a week, and she helped me understand how wrong my actions were. I know I can't stop him if he insists on getting a divorce, but I was hoping you could schedule us a couples counseling session to try to repair our marriage. We have been together for over 50 years, and it seems to me that the least my husband could do is agree to undergo joint therapy before abandoning our marriage. When Debbie sat down, she looked at me with a sly grin on her face. I was sure that the judge would definitely ask Debbie to marry him. He liked her speech so much. It wasn't good at all. I looked pleadingly at my lawyer to do something when I heard that the judge was addressing me. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, are you paying attention? I asked you, what do you think about what your wife said? She made a very convincing argument. Surely your 50-year relationship is worth trying to save. Oh shit, I said to myself. This can't be happening to me. My wife could hardly contain her glee. My lawyer was scribbling something in his notebook. It looks like he was drawing a big Phillips head screw. I'm totally fucked. But then I had an epiphany. I was in battle again, and the first shot had already been fired. I replied, Your Honor, may I take a moment to reflect on what my wife said? She really gave me a reason to think about it. I'd like to talk to my lawyer. The judge replied quite good-naturedly. Of course, I think it's reasonable. It seemed to everyone in the courtroom that they had witnessed a real Hallmark Film Studio moment. I quickly turned to my lawyer, who by this time had finished screwing in the Phillips head screw. What happens if I withdraw my application for divorce right now? Will he still be able to schedule a consultation? My lawyer, who looked like Clarence Darrow, an American lawyer who, for ideological reasons, acted as a lawyer in many famous trials, turned around and said, No, he can't. The court will no longer have jurisdiction in this matter. One more question, Clarence. Who? It doesn't matter now. What happens if I just disappear? My wife would have to serve me to get a divorce, right? Yes, but it's really not that simple. In a year, she may get a divorce because she was abandoned, he replied. Only if I'm lucky, I said thoughtfully and sighed heavily. Is there a law that says I have to live with my wife? My thoughts were racing right now. No, it doesn't exist, he replied in the manner of a lawyer. Then a light bulb went on in his head and he asked, Will I still get paid? Of course, Clarence, of course. I smiled broadly, straightened my tie, wiped my hands to smooth out my trousers, and stood up to address the court. Everyone wanted it to end up like in the Hallmark movies, and I was going to give it to them. Well, sort of. Your Honor, in light of the fact that my wife has spoken in the most convincing way, I immediately withdraw my petition for divorce. There was real bedlam in the courtroom. Although no, there were only about 12 people there, and it was lunchtime, so those who were not involved in the process got up to go to the cafeteria. The judge banged the gavel, granting my request, smiling broadly and with tears in his eyes. My wife and her lawyer were crying with happiness themselves. I was furious, but I put on what I hoped was a happy face and walked straight out of the courtroom. I walked to my car and my wife was right behind me, muttering something about how happy we were, blah, blah, blah. I started the car and left it standing in the parking lot, wondering what had just happened. After leaving the parking lot, I threw my phone into the bushes and drove straight to work, where I immediately went to the HR department and retired. I realized that I can count on my 401k since I turned 59 and a half years old. I won't be able to receive Social Security for a few more years. But with my 401st and our other assets, I knew I could do it. I went to our bank from work. I've done all the things that people do right away in a divorce. Our house was paid for and cost almost $1 million. Everything else we had was about the same value, so I was going to take it all, put it in my name only, and re-register the house with Debbie. My family didn't know where I lived and only contacted me for work or by phone, so I had time to complete my plans without hindrance. 2 weeks later, having arranged a meeting with Debbie, I drove up to our house, now probably to my wife's house, in my brand new 11.5-meter Class A motorhome, Georgetown. My new Jeep Wrangler 4x4 was hooked to the tow hook behind it and ready to ride. I knocked on the door and heard Debbie approaching from inside. All three of our daughters were there too, because I had warned them of my arrival. I knew there was going to be trouble, and I wanted them to look after Debbie. "Honey, you're home. Thank God we were so worried about you." The girls had already looked at the mobile home and were smart enough to suspect something was wrong. "Honey, I actually stopped by to say goodbye." "What do you mean, say goodbye?" "We'll always be together, won't we?" "We've always been together, darling. I'm just going away for a while." "But Tim, what about work?" "I'm retired, Deb, and I'm going to spend some time traveling around the country." "But honey, I can't leave the school district so quickly because school has started classes. I know that traveling around the country in a motorhome is our dream, but right now I just can't do it." She still didn't understand, but my daughters understood and they were stunned. They were already burning holes in me with their eyes, because they knew that I was going to leave them to deal with my dissolute, stupid wife, and they were unhappy. "We need to go inside and talk, Debbie. I have a lot to tell you, and I'll give you a chance to speak out too." We all went into the kitchen and sat down at the table. It took my breath away thinking about all the family meetings we had at this table. The thought that this would be the last meeting was almost unbearable for me. But I've been thinking a lot about my situation for the last couple of weeks. I didn't have any anger left in me. I was no longer nervous, afraid, or insecure. I felt calmer than I have ever felt in recent years. So I started the meeting. "First of all, I want to apologize to you, Debbie, and to you girls, for the way I behaved when you first told me about your plans to sleep with other men. I know that I behaved like a child in the hospital." I raised my hand before Debbie could say a word. "Please let me finish. I know you didn't have the heart attack. In perverted circumstances, you may have really saved my life. The heart attack was bound to happen someday anyway, and thanks to the fact that you were there and immediately called for help, I am alive and here today. The doctors assured me of this, so thank you." It really confused her. "I've been thinking a lot since our court hearing, and I've realized something, Debbie. Neither you nor I have ever been on our own. We've been together since elementary school. I think I understand now how you felt when you told me what you were going to do. I've been focusing on the love component of your desire, although I think you actually said you wanted to be alone. You wanted to get up and take your life into your own hands. Then I realized that I was in the same position as you. Our whole life, all our plans were built together, and now I also want to live alone. I think we both need to be apart to understand who we are as individuals." At this point, I let her talk because it would have been impossible to stop her. "But I don't want to be alone. I will never give you a divorce. We will be together for the rest of our days." I screwed up so much when I told you all this. How she managed to say this through tears and sniffling, I do not know. She looked like she was going to hyperventilate. The girls, despite the tears in their eyes, remained surprisingly calm and quiet. "Deb, I accept that you will never give me a divorce, and I don't want to get divorced anymore. It doesn't make any difference to me, but we're not going to live together anymore. I need to understand who I am outside of us." I handed her the deed of inheritance across the table. "I'm giving you the house and taking most of our other assets, and it ends up being 50-50. The girls were openly crying now because they understood. "Tim, honey, don't do this. I can make it up to you. I know that in time you will be able to forgive me. I haven't dated anyone in months. My therapist helped me realize how stupid I was. Please don't do this. You said you'd be back. I've already forgiven you, Deb. Maybe someday I'll come back. I'm releasing you from our wedding vows. I want you to experience everything you want in life without any guilt. I just can't be here while you're doing this. But how can I get in touch with you if I need to talk? You can't leave me like this. It's not fair." She put her head down on the table, sobbing hysterically, unable to speak any further. I turned to my daughters. "Girls, I'm really sorry that everything turned out this way. I will always love you, and please take care of your mother for me. If you need to contact me, you can email me. I don't have a phone number or a mailing address, as I don't plan to stay in one place for a long time." They were all hysterical when I got up and walked out the door. I got into my mobile home and, without looking back, set off for a new life. One